The small town of Willow Creek was nestled deep in the rolling hills of rural America, where time seemed to pass more slowly, and the biggest news was often the weather. But for 12-year-old Will Miller, life was anything but ordinary. Perched on the roof of his modest home every night, Will gazed at the infinite expanse of the cosmos through a battered telescope gifted by his late grandfather. His room was a shrine to the stars, posters of constellations, shelves crammed with books on astrophysics, and a bulletin board cluttered with handwritten notes and star charts. That evening, as the town slept, Will's eyes widened. Through his telescope, he saw an object he didn't recognize, bright, swift, and unmistakably out of place. His fingers flew across the keys of his laptop as he input coordinates and tracked its trajectory. Hours of frenzied calculations left him pale and breathless. "It's a comet, and it's on a collision course with Earth," he whispered, his voice quivering with a mix of fear and resolve. The next morning, the Willow Creek Farmers Market was alive with the chatter of locals buying fresh produce and sharing gossip. Will, clutching a poster covered in frantic handwriting and scribbled equations, clambered onto a wooden chair near the town's central fountain. "Listen to me," he yelled, his voice cracking but firm. "A comet is coming, and it's going to hit Earth in 2 weeks. We need to act now, or it's all over." Heads turned. The lively conversation stilled, replaced by incredulous laughter. "Will Miller, are you writing a sci-fi novel now?" shouted Mr. Dempsey, the owner of the local hardware store. "Kid, you've been watching too many movies," chuckled another man. Even Will's mother, Susan, who had been scanning for fresh tomatoes at a nearby stand, turned crimson with embarrassment. She hurried toward him, her voice low and urgent. "Will, get down from there this instant. You're making a spectacle of yourself." "No," Will insisted, holding his ground. "This is serious. Look at my calculations." He held up the poster, but the crowd only jeered louder. "Sweetheart," Susan whispered harshly, pulling at his arm. "Enough. People are going to think you've lost your mind." Will's cheeks flushed, but not with embarrassment, with determination. As his mother dragged him down, he began distributing hastily made flyers to anyone within reach. "Take one, please. You might not believe me now, but when it's too late, you'll wish you had," he pleaded, his voice cracking with urgency. Most people crumpled the paper or dropped it on the ground. A few took it, humoring him, though their amused smile stung. The only person who didn't mock him was little Emily Carter, a 7-year-old with pigtails and a curious mind. She tugged on Will's sleeve, her wide eyes filled with concern. "Is it really true? The world's gonna end." Will crouched to her level and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It doesn't have to, Emily, but we need to act fast." Her parents quickly whisked her away, murmuring apologies to Susan. Will watched them leave, frustration etched on his face. As the day wore on and the market emptied, Will sat dejectedly by the fountain, his flyers scattered around him. The echoes of laughter still rang in his ears, but he clenched his fists. "I don't care if they don't believe me," he muttered to himself. "I'll find someone who does." Above him, the first stars of the evening began to twinkle, as if silently rooting for the boy who dared to challenge the laughter of a world. By the time the sun rose over Willow Creek the following morning, Will's impassioned warnings were just another anecdote for the locals to share over breakfast. But unknown to them, something extraordinary had already begun. Someone at the farmer's market had recorded Will's speech, his desperate cries punctuated by the skeptical laughter of the crowd. The shaky video, complete with Will's furious insistence and frantic calculations scrawled on his poster, found its way onto social media. Within hours, it exploded. The hashtags #ComicKid, and hashtag end of the world trended across platforms. Memes followed swiftly. One showed Will's face superimposed on a superhero's body, shouting, "I warned you." Another had him holding a telescope like a bazooka, with the caption, "Ready for impact." At first, the world treated it like a joke. News anchors chuckled as they replayed snippets of his impassioned speech. Late-night talk show hosts riffed on the idea of a 12-year-old discovering a world-ending comet. But buried beneath the mockery, the video caught the attention of people who took it seriously. Among them was Elon Musk, sitting in his sprawling SpaceX office in Hawthorne, California. Elon scrolled through Twitter on his phone. A particular headline caught his eye. 12-year-old claims comet will destroy Earth and says he has proof. Intrigued, he clicked. He watched the video, pausing as the camera zoomed in on the equations scribbled on Will's poster. Elon's analytical mind kicked into high gear. He grabbed a notepad and began recreating the calculations on his own. After an hour of feverish work, he leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. The kid might actually be right, he muttered. Elon wasted no time. He tweeted to his millions of followers, "Will Miller might be onto something. I'm going to investigate this personally." The tweet sent shockwaves through the internet. The laughter stopped. People scrambled to rewatch the video, suddenly taking it far more seriously. Within hours, reporters descended on Willow Creek like a flock of vultures. Susan Miller was in the middle of baking a pie when a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find a horde of cameras and microphones pointed at her. "Mrs. Miller, how does it feel to raise the boy who could save the world? Do you believe your son's comet theory? Has Elon Musk contacted you yet?" Susan slammed the door, her hands shaking. "Well," she called, storming into the living room. Will was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, poring over a new set of calculations. He looked up, startled. "What did you do? The whole town is outside," Susan exclaimed. Will peeked through the curtain. The lawn was swarming with journalists and curious onlookers. His heart raced. But it wasn't fear, it was vindication. "I didn't do anything, Mom," he said. "They must have seen the video." Susan rubbed her temples. "Do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? Elon Musk doesn't play games. And neither does the media. They'll eat you alive." Before Will could respond, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Parting the crowd like the Red Sea, a man in a sharp suit stepped out. Adjusting his earpiece, "Elon Musk is here," the man announced, his voice crisp and authoritative. The murmurs grew into a buzz of excitement as Elon Musk himself emerged from the vehicle. Dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, he exuded a calm confidence. He made his way to the Miller household, his piercing gaze locking onto Will through the window. Susan opened the door hesitantly. Elon offered a polite nod. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice even. "I'd like to speak to your son." Susan hesitated, her protective instincts warring with the gravity of the moment. Finally, she stepped aside. "Will's in the living room," she said. Elon entered and found Will sitting on the carpet, his calculations scattered around him. The boy looked up, eyes wide with equal parts awe and determination. "You're Will Miller," Elon said, crouching to meet his gaze. "The Comet Kid?" Will nodded. "Did you see my work?" "I did," Elon replied. "And I think you're onto something. Your calculations are solid. The comet's trajectory checks out." Will's heart skipped a beat. "You believe me?" "I do," Elon said, his tone serious. "And if you're right, we've got a lot of work to do. Are you ready to help me save the world?" Will didn't hesitate. "Yes," Elon stood, extending his hand. "Then let's get started." The world had laughed at Will Miller. But now, with Elon Musk at his side, everything was about to change. By the time the sun set over Willow Creek, Elon Musk had turned the Miller household into the epicenter of a global investigation. Engineers, astronomers, and analysts from SpaceX and Tesla worked remotely, filling the family's dining room table with laptops and blueprints. Will's bedroom became an impromptu command center, where his scrawled notes were scanned and cross-referenced by Elon's team. A day later, Elon held a private video conference with NASA's top brass. His expression was sharp as he presented the findings, sharing his screen to display Will's original calculations alongside corroborating data from his own scientists. "This is the real deal," Elon stated flatly. "The comet, which we've named Perseus, will collide with Earth in exactly 12 days. Its size and speed suggest catastrophic damage. Coastal cities wiped out. Climate destabilized. Total chaos." NASA's lead scientist, Dr. Evelyn Hargrove, leaned into the camera, her brow furrowed. "These calculations, they're sound," she admitted reluctantly. "But we need to confirm independently before we issue a statement. If we're wrong, we'll have wasted a few days." Elon interrupted. "But if we're right and do nothing, we won't have a world left to argue in." Elon's growing pressure, combined with mounting public interest, forced NASA to expedite their analysis. Within 24 hours, the agency issued a grim confirmation. Comet Perseus is on a direct collision course with Earth. Estimated impact: 11 days. The announcement ignited a global firestorm. News anchors delivered the grim update with pale faces and somber tones. Panic rippled through the streets as people swarmed stores, hoarding food, water, and fuel. Videos of Perseus, now visible to the naked eye as a streak of light in the night sky, flooded social media. In Willow Creek, the townspeople who had mocked Will were suddenly desperate to speak with him. Pastor Johnson, the town's revered spiritual leader, approached Will on the steps of the local library, where the boy had sought a moment of quiet. "Will," the pastor said, clutching his Bible tightly, "I've misjudged you. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and it seems He's chosen you to deliver this warning. Please, pray with me for guidance." Will stood, his voice calm but firm. "Pastor, I don't think prayer is going to stop the comet. We need action. Science got us here, and science will get us out." The pastor nodded solemnly. "Then may God guide your science." Will's classmates, who had avoided him like the plague days earlier, now crowded around him at the diner. Even the town's mayor, a grizzled Vietnam veteran named Jack Rourke, stopped by the Miller home to apologize personally. "Kid, I thought you were just another dreamer, but it turns out you're a damn genius," Mayor Rourke said, tipping his hat. "Let me know if there's anything this town can do for you." As the world unraveled, Elon Musk stepped forward to calm the chaos. In a globally televised press conference, he stood behind a podium, flanked by Will and Dr. Hargrove. "Humanity has faced great challenges before," Elon began, his voice resolute, "and we've risen to them. Perseus is no different. We have a plan, and we'll need the world's brightest minds to execute it. This is a challenge for all of humanity. Together, we can save our planet." The plan, he explained, involved a fleet of rockets equipped with advanced propulsion systems designed to nudge the comet off its collision course. The technology was untested, the margin for error razor-thin, and the clock was ticking. But not everyone was on board. Governments worldwide, already struggling to contain panic, were hesitant to follow Elon's lead. During a tense video conference with global leaders, the U.S. Secretary of Defense voiced a concern that many shared. "This is an unprecedented situation. Mr. Musk, your plan is bold, but it risks wasting resources we may need for recovery. If it fails, we'll have lost precious time." Elon leaned forward, his tone sharp. If we do nothing, there won't be any recovery to prepare for. The argument dragged on, but Elon's charisma and Will's irrefutable calculations won over many skeptics. NASA and international space agencies reluctantly pledged support, though tensions remained high. In the Miller household, the growing spotlight weighed heavily on Susan. She pulled Will aside late one evening, her face lined with worry. "Will," she said softly, "I know you're trying to save the world, but you're still just a boy. This is too much for you. I can handle it." Will insisted. "I have to. No one else saw this coming. If I don't help, who will?" Susan hugged him tightly. "Just promise me one thing," she whispered. "Don't lose yourself in all of this. No matter what happens, you're still my son." Outside, Perseus grew brighter, its ominous glow a stark reminder of the limited time remaining. Elon Musk's vision for saving Earth was ambitious, bold, and, to many, completely insane. The plan was to launch a fleet of rockets, equipped with precision propulsion systems, to intercept and gently nudge Perseus off its deadly trajectory. Dubbed Operation Deflect, the project required a global coalition of scientists, engineers, and every scrap of Elon's considerable resources. In a cavernous hangar at SpaceX headquarters, teams worked day and night assembling rockets. Will, now a central figure, moved through the controlled chaos with purpose far beyond his years. Clad in an oversized SpaceX jacket, he worked alongside the world's top minds, adjusting calculations and double-checking trajectories. "Elon, we're going to need at least 5 successful launches to guarantee the comet shifts enough," Will said during a briefing. Elon nodded, his arms crossed as he studied the models. "And we'll only get one shot at this. No margin for error." Despite the urgency, Operation Deflect faced mounting challenges, not from science, but from politics. The U.S. government, wary of Elon's unilateral approach, dispatched agents to monitor the operation. Among them was Mr. Carter, a stone-faced man whose mere presence seemed to sap the energy from any room he entered. "This is beyond your jurisdiction, Mr. Musk," Carter said during a tense meeting in the command center. "You don't have authorization to proceed with a private operation of this scale. The political and military risks are too great." Elon's response was immediate and cutting. "The risks of not acting are extinction. We don't have time to wait for you to draft memos or debate funding allocations. We're moving forward." Carter's jaw tightened. "If this operation fails, billions could die, and the blame will fall squarely on you. If it succeeds, you'll be thanking me." Elon shot back. Will, sitting at the edge of the table, couldn't contain himself. "How can you argue about jurisdiction when the entire planet is at stake?" he said, his voice cracking with frustration. Carter turned to him, his gaze icy. "Stay in your lane, son. This isn't a science fair. It's not bureaucracy either." Will fired back, his face flushed with anger. "If you keep slowing us down, it'll be too late." Tension hung thick in the air until Elon stepped in. "Carter, you can either help or get out of the way. Choose wisely." Despite the government's resistance, Operation Deflect pressed on. The first wave of rockets, named the Odyssey Fleet, was scheduled to launch in 48 hours. The atmosphere in Willow Creek and the SpaceX headquarters was electric with hope and fear. However, not everyone was rooting for Elon's success. Deep in the shadows of corporate rivalry, executives at Nova Aerospace, a government-backed defense contractor, saw the project as a threat. If Elon succeeded, it would overshadow their influence and endanger their lucrative government contracts. In a secret meeting, Nova's CEO, Harold Bennett, addressed his board. "Musk is a loose cannon," he said, tapping a cigar against the edge of an ashtray. If he pulls this off, he becomes untouchable. We can't let that happen. What are you suggesting? Asked a board member cautiously. Disruption. Bennett replied. Subtle but effective. Let him feel the weight of competition. In the days leading up to the launch, signs of sabotage began to emerge. Engineers reported corrupted navigation codes in the rocket systems. Supplies went missing. Delays mounted. One night, while reviewing rocket schematics in the hangar, Will noticed an anomaly in the guidance algorithms. His brow furrowed as he ran the numbers again. Elon, he shouted, running across the room. Something's wrong with the navigation systems. If we launch like this, the rockets will miss the comet entirely. Elon hurried over, reviewing the data. His face darkened. This wasn't an accident. Someone's tampering with the system. Security was tightened immediately, but the clock was ticking. Elon called an emergency meeting with his team, including Will. We're dealing with sabotage, Elon announced. Nova Aerospace or someone with similar motives is behind this. But we're not stopping. We'll fix the rockets and track down the culprits later. Right now, the comet is our only enemy. Will's voice rose in defiance. They'd rather let the world end than let someone else save it? That's insane. It is, Elon agreed, his tone grim. But insanity thrives when the stakes are this high. We've got to outthink them through sheer determination. The team worked around the clock to repair the corrupted systems. Trust was hard to come by, and every team member was scrutinized. Still, the repairs were completed with hours to spare. As the countdown to the first launch began, the world watched in nervous anticipation. The rockets, gleaming under floodlights, stood ready on the launch pad like sentinels against annihilation. But even with the fixes, lingering doubts remained. Would the sabotage have unseen consequences? Will stood next to Elon, staring at the towering rockets. Do you think it'll work? He asked quietly. Elon placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It has to. Will, failure isn't an option. Outside the control room, Mr. Carter watched silently, his expression unreadable. The control room at SpaceX headquarters was alive with activity as the countdown to the first launch began. Monitors displayed live feeds of the Odyssey fleet's rockets standing tall against the desert sky. Engineers buzzed around the room, double-checking systems, while Elon Musk, Will Miller, and a handful of key players monitored every detail. Navigation systems locked and verified, announced an engineer. Telemetry stable, added another. Will leaned over a console, his heart pounding. He had never been so nervous in his life. For months, his life had been consumed by calculations, simulations, and the weight of the world's expectations. Now, it all came down to this moment. Elon glanced at him. You okay? Will nodded, though his hands trembled. I just hope everything works. It will, Elon said firmly. We've come too far to fail now. The countdown reached T-minus 10 minutes when the first sign of trouble emerged. An alarm blared, and red warning lights flashed across the monitors. Navigation error detected on Rocket 3. An engineer called out. Will's stomach dropped. He sprinted to the console, scanning the error report. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, frantically typing. I triple-checked these systems last night. It was fine. Elon joined him, his face a mask of calm intensity. What's the source of the error? Will's fingers flew across the keyboard. The guidance algorithm's been corrupted again. Someone tampered with it. This isn't a glitch. Another engineer gasped. Rocket 3's trajectory will overshoot the comet by 400 miles if it launches like this. Shut it down, Elon ordered. Pull Rocket 3 from the launch sequence. But the saboteurs had planned for this. As engineers scrambled to isolate Rocket 3, a second error appeared, this time in the primary communication network linking the control center to the launch site. "Comms are down," shouted a technician. "It's a coordinated attack." Will realized, his voice shaking. "They're trying to force a failure." Elon clenched his fists, his mind racing. "We need to reroute control through the backup network. Get me diagnostics on every rocket." Now, the team worked furiously to regain control. But the saboteurs had exploited weaknesses that even Elon hadn't anticipated. The clock ticked down mercilessly. T-minus 5 minutes. Will's frustration boiled over. He slammed his fists on the console. Who's doing this? Why would they sabotage a mission to save the planet? Elon's jaw tightened. Money, power, fear of losing control. Take your pick. Across the room, Mr. Carter stepped forward, his arms crossed. "I warned you this would happen. Musk, you've made yourself too many enemies. And yet you're still here, doing nothing useful." Elon snapped. Before Carter could respond, Will stood up. "We don't have time for this." He pointed at the screen displaying Rocket 3's corrupted trajectory. "If we can't isolate the error, we need to rewrite the navigation code manually now." "That's a suicide mission," an engineer said. "The rocket systems are locked down at the launch pad. Whoever goes out there won't have time to get clear before the launch." "I'll do it," Elon said without hesitation. "No," Will shouted. "You can't. If something happens to you, the mission falls apart. And if we don't fix this, the world falls apart." Elon countered. Will stepped forward, his voice steady. "Then let me go. I spotted the error, and I know how to fix it." "No way," Elon said. "I can't send a 12-year-old to. I'm the reason we're all here." Will interrupted. "I saw the comet first. I ran the numbers. If I can help save the world, I can't stand by and do nothing. Please. Trust me." The room fell silent. Elon studied Will, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but I'm sending 2 of my best engineers with you. Suit up." T-minus 3 minutes. Will sprinted to the equipment room, pulling on a fireproof jumpsuit and helmet as the engineers briefed him on the exact steps needed to fix the navigation system. His hands shook, but his resolve was unshakable. As the countdown continued, Will and his escorts raced across the launch site to Rocket 3. The ground rumbled beneath their feet, and the roar of the other rockets priming for launch filled the air. Navigation panels on the starboard side. One engineer shouted over the noise. Will climbed a narrow ladder to reach the panel, his heart pounding like a drum. He unscrewed the cover, revealing a maze of wires and circuit boards. 3 minutes. "Kid," Elon's voice crackled through his earpiece. "You've got to move fast." Will's fingers worked with precision as he rewired the corrupted circuits and manually input the corrected algorithm. Sweat dripped down his forehead, stinging his eyes. But he didn't stop. T-minus 1 minute. "We're out of time," one engineer yelled. "Just a few more seconds," Will shouted, his voice raw. With trembling hands, he completed the final connection. The system hummed to life, and the trajectory data reset to its proper course. Navigation restored, a voice announced in the control room. "Get out of there, Will," Elon barked. Will scrambled down the ladder, but the ground began to shake violently. The rocket engines roared to life, and flames shot out from the launch pad. "Run," one engineer screamed, grabbing Will and dragging him toward the exit. The 3 of them dove behind a barricade just as Rocket 3 lifted off, its brilliance lighting up the night sky. The ground trembled beneath them, and the air was thick with heat and smoke. In the control room, cheers erupted as the Odyssey fleet successfully launched. Elon leaned back in his chair. exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Will," he said into the microphone, his voice filled with relief. "You just saved the mission back at the launch site." Will lay on the ground, exhausted but alive. He looked up at the sky, watching the rockets streak toward Perseus like arrows of hope. As the Odyssey fleet rocketed into the night sky, tension hung thick in the control room. Engineers and scientists huddled around monitors, tracking each rocket's progress as they surged toward the deadly comet. Perseus, the fate of the world, depended on precise timing, perfect alignment, and a bit of luck. Elon Musk stood at the center of it all, his expression unreadable as he absorbed the data pouring in. Beside him, Will Miller, bruised and soot-smudged from his daring repair, clutched a cup of water he hadn't yet remembered to drink. Rocket 1 approaching designated point for thrust activation. An engineer announced. Will glanced up at Elon. "This is it," he whispered. Elon gave him a small, encouraging nod. "This is it." One by one, the rockets reached their designated positions near Perseus. Using advanced propulsion systems, they would fire bursts of energy to nudge the comet off its deadly collision course. Every calculation, every adjustment made over the past days had led to this moment. Prepare for first thrust activation. Came the command. Rocket 1, firing in 3, 2, 1. A plume of energy erupted from Rocket 1, pushing against Perseus's gravitational pull. The control room erupted into cheers as the monitors showed the comet's trajectory shifting slightly. Rocket 2, prepare for thrust. But just as the second rocket was about to fire, a red warning flashed across the screen. Rocket 4 has malfunctioned, an engineer yelled. Thrust systems offline. Elon's heart sank. Rocket 4 was critical to the operation. Without its contribution, the comet wouldn't deviate enough to miss Earth. Options? Elon demanded. We could redistribute the load to the other rockets, but it risks destabilizing their systems. The engineer replied. Or we could attempt a manual override, said another. The room fell silent. Manual override meant physically repairing the rocket in space, a near impossible feat, especially with time running out. I'll go, Elon said without hesitation. The control room buzzed with protests, but Elon silenced them with a raised hand. I built these rockets. If anyone's going to fix it, it's me. Will stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chaos. You can't go alone. I'll go with you. No, Elon said firmly. You've done enough. Will, you're just a kid. Will squared his shoulders. And you're the guy the whole world needs to run this mission. If something happens to you, it's over. Let me help. I'm not scared. Elon studied Will for a moment, seeing the same determination that had driven the boy to stand on a chair and warn his entire town about the comet. Finally, he nodded. Suit up. Within an hour, Elon and Will were aboard a SpaceX shuttle heading toward Rocket 4. The craft sped through the void of space, the silence outside contrasting with the tense energy inside the cabin. Will sat strapped into his seat, his eyes wide as he stared at the infinite expanse of stars. You okay? Elon asked. Will swallowed hard. It's just, I never thought I'd actually be up here. Elon smirked. Dream big enough, and anything's possible. When they reached Rocket 4, the situation was even worse than they'd feared. The thrust systems had been severely damaged, likely due to the sabotage. Fixing it would require intricate work on the rocket's exterior. Elon attached his safety tether and turned to Will. Stay in the shuttle. I'll handle this. No way, Will said, already fastening his own tether. You need someone to monitor the systems while you work. Elon sighed, but didn't argue. Together, they exited the shuttle, floating toward Rocket 4. The comet loomed in the distance, its surface a jagged, icy expanse. As they worked, the clock ticked down mercilessly. Will called out readings from his handheld monitor, while Elon made painstaking adjustments to the rocket systems. 2 minutes to thrust activation. Will said, "I'm almost done." Elon replied, his voice calm but strained. Suddenly, a small explosion rocked the rocket, sending debris flying. The force knocked Will off balance, his tether snapping taut as he spun into open space. "Will!" Elon shouted, gripping the rocket to steady himself. "I'm okay," Will yelled, struggling to reel himself back toward the rocket. "Just finish the repairs." Elon worked faster than he ever had in his life. With seconds to spare, he completed the final connection and activated the thrust systems. The rocket roared to life, and a powerful burst of energy pushed Perseus further off course. Back in the shuttle, Elon and Will watch the monitors as the comet's trajectory updated in real time. The data was clear. Perseus would miss Earth. "We did it," Elon said, his voice filled with awe. Will grinned, tears streaming down his face. "We actually did it, back on Earth." The world erupted in celebration. Crowds gathered in city squares, hugging strangers and cheering as news of the successful mission spread. In Willow Creek, the townspeople who had once laughed at Will now hailed him as a hero. As the shuttle began its descent, Will gazed out the window, watching the Earth grow larger and more vibrant. He thought about everything that had led him here, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. "You know," he said to Elon, "I think this is just the beginning." Elon chuckled. "Kid, you've already changed the world. What's next for you?" Will smiled. "I don't know, but I can't wait to find out." When Elon Musk's shuttle touched down at the Kennedy Space Center, the world was waiting. Cameras clicked furiously, reporters jostled for position, and the cheers of thousands filled the air. For the first time since the announcement of the comet's impending collision, humanity felt a collective sigh of relief. The hatch opened, and Elon emerged first, his trademark confidence replaced with quiet satisfaction. A moment later, Will Miller stepped into the sunlight, looking small against the towering spacecraft, but carrying the poise of someone far beyond his years. The crowd erupted. Signs waved in the air. "Thank you, Will, and our hero." Some people wept openly, overcome by the sheer enormity of what had just transpired. Susan Miller stood at the front of the crowd, tears streaming down her face. The moment she saw her son, she broke through the barriers and ran to him, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "You scared me half to death," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But I've never been prouder of you." Will hugged her back, his own tears falling freely. "I'm okay, Mom. We did it." The celebration continued for days. World leaders sent messages of gratitude, naming Will and Elon as global heroes. A formal ceremony was held at the United Nations headquarters, where Will stood alongside Elon and other key figures from the mission. During the ceremony, the Secretary General presented Will with the Humanities Star Award, the highest honor ever given for contributions to the survival of humankind. Cameras flashed as Will stepped up to the podium to deliver his speech. He cleared his throat, the microphone amplifying his nervous breath. But when he spoke, his voice was steady and filled with conviction. "Not long ago, I was just a kid with a telescope, staring at the stars and dreaming about what was out there. I never imagined that I'd be part of something like this. But when I saw the comet, I knew I couldn't stay silent, even if no one believed me." He paused, scanning the room filled with dignitaries and scientists. This mission wasn't just about stopping a comet. It was about proving what we're capable of when we work together. Science, courage, and determination saved the world. And if we remember that, we can face any challenge. The audience rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Back in Willow Creek, life began to return to a new kind of normal. The once quiet town was now a tourist hotspot, drawing visitors eager to see the home of the boy who saved the world. The town's library named its newly built observatory after Will, and the local diner added a new item to its menu, the Comet Burger, for Will. However, the experience had ignited something far greater than fame. One evening, not long after the ceremony, he climbed back onto his roof with his trusty telescope. The stars seemed brighter now, filled with infinite possibilities. As he adjusted the lens, a familiar voice called from below, "Mind if I join you?" Will looked down to see Elon Musk, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Sure," Will said, scooting over to make room. Elon climbed up awkwardly, handing Will a mug. They sat in silence for a while, staring at the night sky. "You know," Elon said, breaking the quiet, "NASA has been asking about you. They want to offer you an internship." Will blinked in surprise. "Me? But I'm just a kid who saw what NASA missed." Elon said with a grin, "You're not just any kid, Will. You're a visionary, and the world needs more of those." Will stared at the stars, his heart pounding with excitement. "An internship at NASA? That sounds amazing." Elon nodded. "But don't let it be the end of the story. You've already done the impossible once. Who's to say what else you can do?" Will smiled, the possibilities stretching out before him like the vastness of the universe. The boy who once stood on a chair at the farmer's market, mocked for his wild ideas, had become a symbol of courage and ingenuity. His journey was far from over as he gazed through his telescope, charting the endless mysteries of space. He knew one thing for certain: the stars weren't just his dream anymore, they were his destiny. The applause from the UN ceremony echoed in Will's mind as he settled back into his life in Willow Creek. Despite the attention from scientists, journalists, and global leaders, the boy who saved the world found himself longing for the simplicity of stargazing on his roof. But simplicity wouldn't come easily. Weeks after the mission's success, invitations from universities, space agencies, and think tanks poured in. Prestigious institutions offered scholarships and mentorships, while tech giants dangled internships and funding for personal research. For a 12-year-old, the whirlwind of possibilities was both exhilarating and overwhelming. One evening, Susan found Will sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of unopened letters. She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Talk to me," she said. "I don't know what to do." Will admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "NASA wants me to intern with them. MIT sent me an invitation to tour their campus. Even Elon's asking me to join some new project. How am I supposed to choose?" Susan smiled softly. "You don't have to decide everything right now. You're still a kid." "Will, it's okay to take your time, but what if I choose wrong?" Will asked, looking up at her. "What if I waste the chance to do something important?" Susan knelt beside him, her expression tender but firm. "You've already done something important, something no one else could do. Whatever you choose next, as long as you follow your heart, you'll be just fine." Her words lingered with Will as he climbed to his rooftop that night. The telescope, battered from years of use, felt like an old friend. He gazed at the heavens, feeling the familiar pull of curiosity and wonder. Suddenly, his phone buzzed beside him. It was a video call from Elon Musk. Will hesitated, then answered. Elon's face appeared on the screen, grinning. "How's my favorite Comet Wrangler?" Will chuckled. "I'm good. Just thinking." "About what?" Elon asked, his tone lighter than usual. "About what's next." Will admitted. "There's so much I want to do." But I don't know where to start. Elon's grin softened into a thoughtful expression. You don't have to decide everything right away. But if you're looking for advice, here's mine. Start with what excites you. The rest will fall into place. Will nodded slowly. I think I just want to keep learning for now. There's so much I still don't know. That's the spirit, Elon said. And if you ever want to tackle something big again, you know where to find me. As the call ended, Will felt a sense of clarity. The journey that had started with a single observation through his telescope wasn't ending. It was evolving. The following week, he made a decision. He accepted NASA's internship offer, but insisted on continuing his education in Willow Creek for now, splitting his time between the internship's virtual program and his regular classes. The arrangement, unprecedented for someone his age, drew admiration from many and skepticism from a few. You sure you can handle it, kid? Mayor Rourke teased during one of their now regular chats at the diner. Will smiled. I handled a comet. I think I can handle some homework. As the months passed, Will's world continued to expand. Under the mentorship of leading scientists, he developed new ideas for asteroid tracking systems. Drawing on the lessons from Perseus, his contributions earned accolades, but his humility remained unshaken. In Willow Creek, Will became a symbol of hope and resilience. A mural of him standing atop the farmer's market chair, holding his poster, was painted on the side of the town library. Tourists snapped photos, while locals used it as a reminder that even the most unassuming voices could change the world. One clear night, as Will adjusted his telescope, Emily Carter, now 8 years old, called up to him from the yard. Will, are you looking for another comet? She asked, her voice full of awe. He smiled down at her. Not tonight, Emily. Tonight, I'm just looking at the stars. Can I look, too? Will climbed down, handing her the telescope with a grin. Of course, but be careful. It might just change your life. As Emily peered into the lens, gasping at the wonders above, Will felt a deep sense of peace. The boy who had once been dismissed as a dreamer was now inspiring others to dream. And somewhere, in the vastness of the cosmos, the next great discovery awaited.